Welcome to the My Citizen Agency channel. Relocating to Europe with your husband or wife is more than just collecting documents and buying tickets. It's a major family decision that affects your legal status, work, finances, housing, children, future plans, and even your relationship as a couple. Very often people think the main thing is for one of us to get a reason to immigrate and the other will join in some way. But in practice, it is the details of a family relocation that can cause delays, rejections, unnecessary expenses, and stress. In this video, we'll discuss what's important to keep in mind if you're planning to relocate to Europe with your husband or wife. We'll talk about documents, marriage legalization, financial requirements, the right to work, children, housing, and common mistakes that are best avoided in advance. The first question to ask is, on what basis is the family planning to relocation? There may be several options. For example, one spouse may have received a work contract in a European country, or they may be enrolling in university, or starting a business, or applying for residency under a program for financially independent individuals, digital professionals, entrepreneurs, investors, or family members of an EU citizen. Why is this important? Because the status of the other spouse depends on the primary basis. In some cases, the husband or wife can submit documents immediately together with the main applicant. In others, one person relocates first, obtains a residence permit, and only then invites their spouse through the family reunification process. Sometimes the other spouse receives the same rights almost immediately, and sometimes their status will depend on the status of the primary applicant. As long as one person's permit is valid, the other's is valid too. Therefore, before starting the process, it is important not just to choose a country, but to understand exactly which path to legalization is right for your family. The next important aspect is marriage documents. If you are legally married, you will need a marriage certificate. However, simply having the document is not enough. To submit it in another country, you generally need to have it prepared, obtain an apostille, or have it consularly legalized, and then have an official translation done. Requirements depend on the country where the document was issued and the country where you are applying. In some places, an apostille and a translation are sufficient. In others, they may request a recent extract from the registry. In some cases, the document must have been issued no earlier than a specified date prior to submission. If the couple is in a common law marriage, the situation is more complicated. Some countries recognize long-term partnerships, but this requires proof of living together, a shared budget, joint accounts, a rent agreement, joint trips, children, or other evidence of the relationship's reality. But it's important to understand, not every country treats a partner as equivalent to a spouse. Therefore, if the marriage isn't officially registered, you need to check in advance whether the other partner will be eligible for residency with the main applicant. One of the most common questions is, how much money do you need to show to relocate as a married couple? In many European countries, when applying for a residence permit, you must prove that the family has enough funds, and the amount required for a single person is almost always different from that required for a married couple. If the main applicant is relocating alone, the requirements may be lower. But if a spouse is relocating with them, the government wants to see that the family can afford accommodation, food, insurance, and daily expenses without relying on social assistance. Financial requirements can be verified in various ways: bank statements, an employment contract, tax documents, income statements, savings, an agreement with an employer, or proof of regular remote income. It is very important to consider more than just the minimum amount listed on the agency's website. In reality, the consulate or immigration service may assess the overall picture: income stability, the source of funds, the regularity of income, housing costs, and family composition. Therefore, it is best to calculate a budget in advance, not only for submitting documents, but also for the first few months of life after relocation. A very important point that is often remembered too late: will the other spouse be able to work? In many countries, the spouse of the main applicant is granted a right of residence, but does not always automatically receive the right to work. Sometimes they can work right away. Sometimes they need to apply for a work permit separately. Sometimes the right to work only becomes available after receiving a residence card, and sometimes it is limited by the type of status held by the main applicant. For example, if one spouse is relocating under an employment contract, the other may gain access to the labor market in some countries. But if the basis is study, financial independence, or another type of temporary status, the rules may be different. This is important for financial planning. If a family expects both partners to start working immediately after relocating, they should check in advance how realistic this is. It's also worth considering the recognition of diplomas, licenses, and qualifications. For certain professions, such as medicine, education, law, and engineering, proof of qualifications, language proficiency, and additional exams may be required. When relocating as a family, documents are required not only for the primary applicant. Each adult family member must have their own set of documents. Typically, the following are required: a passport, application forms, photographs, a marriage certificate, proof of accommodation, health insurance, financial documents, criminal background checks, proof of income, and documentation supporting the basis for residency. If children are relocating with you, you will need birth certificates, custody documents, consent from the other parent if they are not relocating, medical records, school transcripts, and translations. Special attention should be paid to the validity periods of the documents. The passport must be valid for a sufficiently long period. A criminal record check often has a limited validity period. Some documents must be current at the time of submission. Translations must be officially certified, and in some cases only by a certified translator in the country of application or the destination country. An error in a single document can delay the entire family relocation process. Therefore, it is best to prepare a separate list of required documents for each person in advance. For many types of residence permits, you must provide proof of your future address. And if a family is relocating, the housing requirements may be stricter than those for a single person. The Migration Authority may take into account the square footage, number of rooms, lease agreement, registration at the address, and whether the accommodation meets the standards for family residence. Sometimes a temporary hotel reservation is not enough. In some countries, you must provide a full-fledged rental agreement. In others, a letter from the host party is required. If a family is relocating with children, the housing issue becomes even more important because the address may determine school placement, healthcare, and registration. In practice, finding accommodation in Europe can take longer than expected. Landlords often ask for a security deposit, proof of income, an employment contract, references, or payment for several months in advance. Therefore, housing is not a mere formality, but one of the key elements of preparation. Health insurance is almost always included in the required set of documents. However, if you're relocating with a partner or children, it's important to make sure the insurance covers every family member. Insurance requirements vary depending on the country and your immigration status. In some places, you'll need private insurance for the initial period. In some places, you can switch to the public system after registration. In others, the insurance must cover hospitalization, emergency care, chronic conditions, or a minimum amount of expenses. Don't just buy the first insurance policy you come across simply because it's cheap. If it doesn't meet the requirements of the consulate or immigration office, your documents may not be accepted. It's also important to understand how your family will receive medical care after relocating, where to register, how to choose a doctor, what to do in an emergency, and which services are billed separately. If a family is relocating with children, the preparations become even more involved. It's important to find out in advance how the education system works in the chosen country. At what age do children start school? What documents are required for school enrollment? Are translations of report cards, vaccination records, and medical records required? Are there schools that teach in English or another language the child understands? How much does a private school cost if a public school is not yet available or suitable? In addition to the paperwork, there is also the emotional adaptation. For a child, relocation means a new country, a new language, new friends, a different school, and a different social environment. The sooner the family begins preparing the child, the smoother the adaptation will be. It is also important to note that in some countries, children are required to attend school, and parents must register them in an educational institution shortly after obtaining a residence. The legal aspects are only one side of the relocation. Family agreements are just as important. Relocating to another country often changes the usual balance. One spouse may find a job more quickly, while the other may be temporarily unemployed. One may be more fluent in the language, while the other may feel dependent. One may be the one who initiated the relocation, while the other may agree for the sake of the family. It's best to discuss these issues in advance. Who will handle the paperwork? Who is responsible for finding accommodation? What is the budget for the first few months? What do we do if one spouse cannot find a job quickly? What is the family's backup plan? In which country or city is the family ready to live, and which options are not suitable? The more honestly expectations are discussed before the relocation, the fewer conflicts arise afterward. One common mistake is to rely only on stories from friends, forums, or bloggers. Even if someone has relocated to the same country, their situation may have been different. A different citizenship, a different income, a different type of residence permit, a different profession, a different family structure, or a different year of application. Immigration rules change. Document requirements are updated. Consulates may interpret individual situations differently. Therefore, other people's personal experiences can be useful as a guide, but not as a set of instructions. For family relocation, it is especially important to get a personalized assessment. Who is the main applicant? What status will the other spouse obtain? What rights will each person have? What documents are needed? What timelines are realistic? And what risks are specific to your situation? Relocating a family almost always takes longer than relocating a single person. You need to collect documents for 2 people or the entire family, arrange for translations and legalization, schedule an appointment to submit your application, wait for a decision, obtain visas or permits, and arrange for accommodation, insurance, tickets, and registration after relocation. Sometimes spouses' documents are processed together, sometimes separately. Sometimes the second spouse can enter immediately. Sometimes you have to wait for a decision on the main applicant. Therefore, you shouldn't buy tickets, quit your job, or terminate your rent agreement before you understand the actual timeline and stages of the process. It's better to have some extra time and a financial cushion than to find yourself in a situation where your documents are still being reviewed, but all your living arrangements have already been finalized. So, if you're planning to relocate to Europe with your spouse, there are a few key points to keep in mind. First, determine the basis for the relocation and the status of each family member. Second, prepare your marriage documents in advance and check the requirements for their legalization and translation. Third, calculate the financial requirements not just for one person, but for the entire family. Fourth, clarify whether your spouse will be able to work after they relocate. Fifth, consider accommodation, insurance, registration, and if you have children, school and their adaptation. And most importantly, don't put off your preparations until the last minute. A family relocation requires attention to detail, planning, and an understanding of the specific country's regulations. If you're just planning to immigrate to the EU and want to understand whether you have a realistic basis for applying for citizenship, submit a request for a free consultation via the link in the description. We will review your situation, create a personalized immigration plan for you, and prepare a complete set of documents to successfully obtain citizenship in one of the EU countries. We work on a one-on-one basis, taking into account your goals, your lifestyle, and your specific circumstances. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in this topic, subscribe to our channel and feel free to ask questions in the comments. We'll regularly publish program reviews, answer frequently asked questions, and share important news about immigration law and life in the EU. Your journey to Europe begins with the first step. My Citizen Agency is here for you, every step of the way.